all right. Look who's here. It's Simpiwe, and it's Kamo, and it's me, and it's you. This Wednesday morning. Kamo and Blatter, of course, you will remember from just last week. We had him on Friday. We were talking about the World Cup soccer, which is just around the corner.
Yes, it is.
A lot of that to get excited about. And I must tell you, after Friday's show, I was suddenly all amped up for this thing. And Simpiwe looking resplendent in the studio this morning. She looks like she has had a very good start to her day, and that this beautiful Wednesday morning is going to turn into an excellent and productive day. I mean, that's how everybody hopes it will be, right? Hey, Simpiwe.
Yes. Morning.
Morning, Simpiwe.
How you guys doing?
All right, excellent. How are you?
I am awesome.
I've got my coffee, so I'm good.
Yeah, that's all you need, right? Like, same here.
That's all you need.
I have to ask this question. Why is it? I mean, it sounds like such a simple thing, but there's still no answer for it. I'm always looking at human nature, and why people behave the way they do. Why is it when it rains, people can't drive properly on the highways and roads? You always see these broken down cars. You always see these cars with their flashing lights on, and they're either driving so super slow, and you don't need to go so super slow. Sometimes that's when the problems happen, or they're going crazy fast because of the rain. They're not paying attention. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know. I always feel like you have to drive with confidence, and people who don't drive with confidence, I think then the weather will kind of dictate how you drive. But if you drive, trusting that you're in control and, whether it's raining or not, then I think you'll be fine because you kind of know, okay, cool, this is how to move. I think it's people who adjust the way they approach driving when it rains, where it's like, do you know how to drive? Because that's the real test. Like, driving in the rain is when you have to kind of show that I can actually drive. That's the real driving test, I feel like.
Well, that's a very long answer for people just bought licenses. Finish and laugh. They really don't know how to drive. That's it. That's the truth. And also, people be driving cars that are not road worthy. Do you know how many taxis are not on the road when it's raining?
I agree with you that people on the second one. I disagree on the first one. People do know how to drive.
I'm in through the top of some of these taxis. Some of them will.
So you won't see them on the road when it's raining. They're not on the road. So it's a sign. But I don't think people know how to drive. Chief, they be buying licenses here for 2.5.
Well, that's the thing. I think there's a spectrum, right, of buying licenses, because I think to actually pass the test is by design probably not the easiest thing to do. That's why you have to turn to, okay, I see what I need to do to get a pass, right? Because I think it's such a stringent test that they can literally just throw one thing at you and be like, nope, it's done. So I think someone figured it out that, hey, man, if we just set the bar incredibly high, unrealistically high, we could make some money out of this. I think that's where we are.
Well,
unfortunately.
Yeah, let's hope somebody's listening. You never know. I mean, we've got very smart people in this little community of ours, in our little audience here on cliffcentral.com. And I've always said that I'd rather have 10 of the people that we currently have listening, even though they give me shit nonstop. The audience is like, and if anything I say that they don't agree with, geez, they tear me a new, hole in my back. But if I had the stupid audience that I used to have on radio, you can guarantee I wouldn't learn anything, they wouldn't learn anything, and we'd all just be as dumb at the end of the day as we were at the start of it. But on this show, now in the mornings, I get to hear from really, really smart people. A lot of these people have been paying attention to the American election results as they've been coming in. I haven't seen a thing, because as far as I can tell, it's really the next 6 or 7 hours that are going to determine the midterm election results. So I haven't watched. I will today.
Same.
Don't you worry. I'll be paying attention.
Same.
But we've got an interesting interview at 7:00 this morning with David Smith. Last week, was it last week or the week before, we had Joel Pollak, who's from Breitbart News. Right. They're firmly on the right. This morning, I've got David Smith. He's from The Guardian, which is firmly on the left. So it's almost like we got a little bit of MSNBC today, and we had a little bit of Fox last week. So don't say that we don't try to bring some balance in, because I know that the people who loved hearing from Joel Pollak last week are going to be pissed off with what David Smith says today. And the people who love David Smith today are going to be pissed off about last week. So it's terrific. We make everybody happy and pissed off, which is what I want. And I'm not one of those people who could care less about trying to be balanced. I just think it helps for us to have both points of view. And I mean,
how much stuff did you kind of agree with Mr. Pollak? Did you find that there was a lot of stuff you were saying where you're lying?
I think my politics are like, if I think about it really hard, I'm not particularly emotional or hardcore about any of these issues. I would prefer a government that isn't completely crazy in America, just so that we don't have a completely crazy downstream result here in South Africa.
Yeah.
But I look at what's happening in the US at the moment, and it is clear to me that the Democrats in the last 2 years have been mismanaging everything. All they had to do, all Joe Biden had to do was just switch the economy back on and not interfere. But he and his Democrat friends could not resist pumping money that they did not have back into the economy. They pumped more money into the US economy, gave free money into the US economy, printed it, than has ever existed on Earth up to a year or two before this. Ever.
Wow.
That's how much. You think about that. That's unprecedented in any way, right? And I don't think that's very smart. I also don't think that all these crazy things that they're trying to do by like transing the kids and by making race politics the number one thing in America, and that's really a Democrat thing. I don't see that as being very smart, because the average American, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, and this is going to be borne out today in the polls, I believe, doesn't care about that stuff as much as they care about inflation, the cost of living, the cost of fuel, jobs, and all of that stuff. So I think that the Dems are going to get a hiding today. I think that's an easy prediction to make, especially if you look at the early polling from all the pollsters, the right, the left, and the middle. But I also think that, the issues that some Republicans are very, very serious about are not the issues that I could particularly care about. I'm not fazed by, I'm a social liberal. In other words, if you want to, like, gay marriage has never been an issue to me. I could care less about that. Or abortion doesn't really affect me, and I do believe I'm probably more on the pro-choice side than anything else. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a woman. I haven't got a child that I didn't want or that I did want. So I don't really have a dog in that fight at this stage. People must do whatever they want. I'm also not massively into, religion or anything else. But what I do care about, and what I think a lot of people are probably motivated by this time round, which wasn't an issue in any previous election, is the way that people had very divergent policies when it came to coronavirus. And you remember the lockdowns? No one will forget. No one's forgetting in a hurry. These politicians and remember, in this country, Cyril was obviously at the forefront of all of this with, well, you must sanitize, you must put on a mask, you must do, how he did all this shit every week for us on TV. It was pointless. And they were all saying, some of them were saying we need a vaccine mandate. I went and got 2 shots of the Pfizer, which I've said already I'm kind of regret. Some people don't regret it. Some people think it was great. I think it was so stupid to keep kids out of school. We found out very early on in this process that this didn't affect children the way that it affected everyone else. And in America, I think there are a ton of people who are very pissed off about the way certain politicians were hard about this lockdown and tried to be draconian and pushed down all kinds of rules that changed people's lives in a big way. And I think they're going to go to the polls today and they're going to punish those people. And unfortunately for the Democrats, they were the ones who were very pro-lockdown. The states that opened up as quickly as possible were states like Florida, which are Republican run. And I wouldn't be surprised if governors like Ron DeSantis and others in red states, wouldn't be surprised if they are the ones who get the benefit of people voting now. Because those people are going to be angry about what happened then. And they're going to let that stew for a little bit. So there are a bunch of politicians who are going to get their asses handed to them today. And it's not a bad thing. We've got to remind these people, and I'm not just talking about American elections here. I'm obviously talking about ours, which are not that far away. We got to remind these people we're in charge of them. That's the whole point of democracy, you know? So anyway, listen to the discussion with me and David Smith later on. That is all I have to say right now about the US elections. We'll have more as, you know, the thing unfolds through the course of the day. But come on, there's something very important we need to discuss this morning, and it's something that I caught everybody at the office, mostly Ryan and Simpiwe, talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
It was all the rage on social media yesterday too. So maybe you want to explain this, and then Simpiwe can jump in, and then we've got a special guest who I know our audience love hearing from.
Yeah, man.
What was the big story on social media in South Africa yesterday?
Man, Booth.
Oh, it wasn't a cheesecake. Damn.
I mean, there's so many ways to kind of go at it. There's the cheesecake angle, there's the Matthew Booth angle, but I mean, at the end of the day, one of our beloved sons.
Start with this, because I didn't know what the hell was happening. I walked into the office yesterday, and everyone in the office, down to the last person, was like talking about Matthew Booth has been cheating on Sonya Booth. They're a famous celebrity couple. Sonya Booth has worked with us at Cliff Central, so full disclosure, you know, I'm very sad for her. She's a friend. She's been a part of our Cliff Central family for a long, long time. I thought their marriage was pretty solid. He often used to come into studio with her when she was doing a show. Matthew, famous footballer. What is the cheesecake angle? Because I still am not clear on this.
Okay, so there's the cheesecake angle, but we gotta back up a little bit, because essentially cheesecake and Tupperware for me are the two kind of keywords. And anyone knows that you don't mess with a black woman and her Tupperware, you know, because that is some high quality plastic container stuff that you're dealing with there, you know. So I mean, I even inherited Tupperware. It's the stuff that stands the test of time. But essentially, oh man, our mate was, you know, I guess enamored with someone else whilst being married. And so the big thing that kind of drove everyone insane was that he one day, on the eve of his son's birthday, was filling the house with a smell. I don't know how cheesecake smell like, you know, but I know when you bake,
Smells
usually
good.
there's vanilla essence in the air, you know, and that's, and you know when someone's baking, it's like, I can't wait to tuck into whatever that is, right? Except Matthew did the whole thing, and then said cheesecake left his home without anyone in the home getting to taste said cheesecake. He put the cheesecake in his beloved wife's Tupperware to deliver it to his friend. And everyone was just like, whoa, man.
His friend being the woman he's seeing on the side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. His gym buddy. I mean, you know, so it's because a lot of the photos of them together, they're in gym clothes. So, you know, that's another thing. It's like for you to be like to someone who's been sweating, and you know, is the, you know, black women's hair when they sweat, it gets all frazzled and shit. To look at that and be like,
Well,
you know, it's like, it's a bit weird.
Before I bring our special guest in, anything you want to add to this that we may have missed?
I will say, so I don't know if you guys ever watched Why Did I Get Married? If you did, you know that there's a character called Angela. And we all thought that lady was crazy because she was like, I check Marcus's pulse. I check when he goes to the gas store and see like how long that trip was. I'll check bank statements to see how much he's making and how much he's spending. And she like had this whole, she even knew his resting heartbeat, right? And we're like, oh, this lady is crazy. And on social media, we found out that no, Angela is based off a real character, that people do this. This was well documented from the time it started until the time she decided to expose everything from trips to the infamous cheesecake that has become South Africa's national dessert now. to just even like saying that, you know, she got like a private investigator. So yeah, she did the whole 9 yards of like saying it started in February and this is what's happened. My car was used. And then where I drew the line was the Tupperware. That's where she was just like, don't mess with a black woman and her Tupperware.
Sure.
And that's what you get.
That's what you get.
Well, I feel that there's no one better than you know, I would usually say Dr. Hanan, and you know, if we can get Sonya on, I would love her to come and talk to Dr. Hanan, because there are lessons in all of this for the rest of us. And I know she's already kind of gone public with this on social media, so at least here she'd know she was in a safe space. But I know that someone else is very outspoken about these things, and the audience of this show love when we bring her on, because she represents so many of us and says the things that we're too afraid to say. And she is none other than us, Jane Malachi. Hello, Jane. How are you?
Hi, Gonchie. How are you?
I'm good. Now, Jane, you were already pulling faces when Kamo was talking about like frazzled hair and stuff. I saw you pulling a face there. You have something to say about that before we even move on to the Sonya and Matthew Booth issue?
Yeah, because I heard him when he say, when the black woman's hair sweating. In other words, the black woman's hair smell like yeah. But if you know what you're doing,
Smells like a guy.
but if you know what you're doing, you will never even hear the sweating because you know exactly what you're doing. You see, sometimes people they pretending like they go to the gym while they know that they're going to see their potential. That's life.
Yeah, it's a whole new meaning of a workout.
Yeah. In other words, we're not gonna trust our partner when they say they go to the gym, especially mine. He's going to the gym every day, like 10 o'clock until 6 o'clock at night. Do you think he has some potential at the gym? The one that show him how to build the body or how to look good.
So Jane, I mean, a lot of people would say, and some people already mentioned this show, a woman knows, a woman can tell when her man is doing something that she doesn't approve of, that she knows he shouldn't be doing. She can tell. There's an instinct, right?
Actions bigger than words. You can see the changes. Men, I don't know how I can put this. You know, once men cheat, you can see he changed a lot of things. He forget about himself. He doing the thing that he never do at the house. You can see maybe sometimes he's on the phone 24/7. He never be on the phone 24/7. But you can see there's something wrong with this man. It's what they do all the time.
Yeah, what sort of behavior besides the phone? Because obviously these days that's where the cheating starts, is on the phone, right? Even if you don't know the person in person, you can find them on social media. That's where a lot of people are cheating at the moment, don't you think?
I think that's correct, Babaji. It's what people they do all the time. Like, yeah, social media, I think, is where people they can just do whatever they want. They find the potential on social media. You can find your man on social media. It's where you can connect, doing all of those things. And it's where the cheating starts.
Well, Kampamba says black women will share a penis, but draw the line at Tupperware.
Yes,
that's true.
Do you know how expensive Tupperware is, Gareth? Yeah. Do you know what cult it has accumulated over the years? Like this thing, Gareth, you don't just get it everywhere. There's stock fails. Our mothers are in Tupperware stock fails. So it's very personal. Even I felt that. I was like, the disrespect. Like.
And it's built to stand the test of time, right? I think Sonya put it in the garage there to say, hey, man, there's a Tupperware, and you can drive over it. Like, you know, in those ads when you drive over something and it still, like, keeps its shape? That's also Tupperware. So I think she was also daring him. So you can park the car, drive over the Tupperware. Still going to look like my Tupperware, but why was it at my house? Is her problem. Like, why did it leave my house?
I think she put the Tupperware by the garage. When you drive in, you can see the Tupperware there. You can ask yourself.
No, of course.
You left the Tupperware at your friend's house, and now the Tupperware is in the garage.
How?
You're asking yourself a lot of questions. In other words, she drove all the way to go and fetch her mother's Tupperware. I don't blame her. Even me, I'm counting all my Tupperware all the time.
Yes.
But the cheesecake?
Well, I mean, Corona's Boring says, Corona's Boring says, and I think this is a good point, some people are really stupid. They can't see it at all. Love is blind. Like if some
All the
people
time.
love each other, they were, and you do get these people. And again, I just want to say, like, I take no joy in Sonya's misery here. You know, there are lots of people who are like, they love this because they love seeing other people going through this, but their own backyard is dirty. You know, their own house is not in order, and they take pleasure in someone who's famous falling apart, and their love life falling apart, their marriage falling apart, because they're like, oh, I'm better than them. But this could happen to any of us, right?
It could, but I think there's also like signs, right? I mean, we ask like, how do you tell? But that whole thing with just being in the home and like exerting all that energy, imagine being in the kitchen of your home, busy baking a cheesecake around
At
your
night,
kids and your wife
at night while I'm sleeping. Why can't
The
you left a
smell.
piece of cake for my children to test in the morning? So you
He
take
should have
the
made
whole
two
cheese.
cakes, Mama Jane.
Like,
He should have made
seriously?
two. He should have
Yeah,
made two
don't take
cakes,
all the
left
cheesecake.
one, and then
Left
taken the
one for
other.
my kids.
Let me ask you something. First of all, I'm very impressed this guy could make a cheesecake. I mean,
This guy can bake. Did you see
Gareth,
the
as
picture?
someone who has made cheesecake before, the baked version, that thing is not easy. It takes a bit of time, and it has to set for a couple of hours. So he did actually put in some work in it. It's like, it's thought. It's like, oh my gosh, you had to get the ingredients, you had to mix things up, you had to make sure, and then put it in the oven, or maybe it was refrigerated for a couple of hours. It wasn't there for 20 minutes. It was there for, and then the next day, obviously, somebody noticed that, weren't you just baking up a storm?
You know what
Where
I
the
want
cake
from
go?
him? I want him to give me the ingredients for cheesecake. Maybe sometimes at night, even me, I have to do the cheesecake so that we can taste and see if you put the amarula. If you put amarula, how was gonna be like? I want
O corobela.
yeah, you see. In other words, that
corrobela.
cheesecake was so special.
Oh, wow.
We don't
But
know
I
if it
think-
tasted good, guys. She literally could have taken that cheesecake and been like, "Oh, thanks," like the effort was there, but we don't know if he made an actual good cheesecake. That's
But
still a mystery.
Did you see the video when she go to fetch the Tupperware? She asked the maid, and the maid, she was like, out of 10, how many did you give her? She was like 9. In other words, the cheesecake was very good.
Oof.
Yeah.
It's
Are you
very
telling
tricky.
me that so Sonya put all of this stuff out on the internet?
Yes.
She took the videos
It's a
even
whole
when she go to
thread. I think there's
that link.
about 18 posts on
Yes.
Instagram.
Yeah.
It's a whole thread. Like, there's a video of when it started. So there's a video of, like, I think the 24th of Feb. Yes. That's
No,
when
it
all
was
started.
Valentine's Day. So
Day.
remember,
Yes.
it was Valentine's Day. That's where it
That's
started.
where it all she dropped a video of when it started, né? And then she documented on the audacity
She's
of
been doing
him
her job,
using my car. And then she was like, no, that was a blessing in disguise, because then she could track her car and all the places that they went to. And then, like, the credit card, then she got a private investigator, and she met with the private investigator, and they had like a selfie moment. And then she also met with homegirl's husband, and he also gave her,
Simpiwe.
yes.
I also thought that guy in the picture was the private investigator, but it's
No, it's
not. It's actually the husband.
Is the
So-
Yes.
husband.
So Sonya was saying that who took the
The one
photo
that-
was the
Yeah.
PI.
Yes.
The one that took the photo of the
restaurant.
husband and Sonya was the PI. So there's another faceless person in this that we don't know who's the private investigator.
Guys,
I wonder
don't
who
play
that
with-
is.
Don't play with the
don't-
angry woman. When the woman is angry, she can keep her all the files. She was throwing all the files, like she was
Yeah,
putting
but
everything. She was telling
it
everyone
was-
that I'm tired. I think she's tired, guys. She's been like tolerating this, but she was like, now it's enough. Let me expose them, because I've been like patient, and now they're playing some game with me. They baking cheesecake at my house while I'm sleeping. In other words, they're going out, they're going somewhere in Limpopo to spend the night. Just imagine.
And you know
the
who was
whole
very
thing was
zen about
documented.
this? Who was very zen
I
was
didn't-
the husband of the lady, because he was like, "I've been struggling with this girl for 10
I've been
years." And I'm like,
struggling
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
Wow.
Like what?
Okay, so let me just remark on something here, because this is all news to me. I didn't follow any of this. The first I heard of it was when I got to the office yesterday. You guys are telling me stuff now that I didn't even know. I'm not going to pretend I give a shit like most people would. But it's interesting. There are a couple of things about human nature that are coming out here that's worth talking about. First one, wow, that she kept these files. She's been sitting on this stuff, as Jane says, keeping the files. She's been sitting on this stuff since Valentine's Day, and she's building.
She's been hating for month and month, Papaji. She's been hating.
Yeah, the Valentine's Day thing, G, is she set it up because Matthew was pitch side on a broadcast, right? So it was Valentine's Day, and the anchor on the show asks everyone like, "Hey guys, it's Valentine's Day. Why are you guys here?" And Matthew's like, "Hey man, it's Valentine's Day every day in the Booth house." And that's kind of what set it off, because it's like, oh snap. So she's like, she did a masterful job. I must be honest, the way she kind of started started releasing the files, and the way she laid everything out, it was masterful. Because it was literally like a soapy on the timeline. It's crazy.
I think the thing that pissed her off, Matthew forgot his birthday son. I think he was supposed to do something about the birthday son. He was not even there because he was in love. You know, sometimes if you're in love, you forget about even the birthday, you forget about everything. You just go crazy and go out with this girl.
Do you think it's love, or do you think it's lust? Because I have to say, as a guy, you know, we're not always the most upstanding citizens when it comes to this stuff. And of course, there are women who cheat. I'm not going to say, we're not going to go down that path now. But there are a lot of guys who it's just sex. Do you think this was love? I mean, baking a cheesecake, something a lustful guy might not do. So that
exactly, to your point, I don't think it was love.
Because all of them, they're married. Both of them are married. They just say, let's cheat and see where it's going to end. It's going to end in tears. This end in tears, I'm telling you.
It always ends in tears. This kind of thing never goes well. No one ever goes, oh, well, you know, you fell in love with someone else. I'm happy to go off on my own. Let's just call this a relationship quits. There's always going to be an ugly ending to this stuff. And every relationship that starts with cheating will end with cheating too. I feel very sorry for Sonya listening to this whole thing. I really do.
But these people, they already tasted the cheesecake while they went out in Limpopo. Do you think they're going to quit? Because if the cheesecake tastes very well, do you think they're going to quit? Because these men, sometimes they're going to tell you that the cheesecake was hot more than my wife. It's what they do. They can say, oh my God, this woman, she's hot.
I think we've got a new word in the dictionary, and it's not about the cheesecake. The cheesecake has become a metaphor for side action.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading this. Okay.
But you know what people were also asking on social media was like, is this the right way to go about exposing your partner for cheating? And was this the right platform? Because in as much as she documented it very well for us to like kind of know and soak up, the reality is that now she's trending, her businesses out there, and we all kind of talking about it. But is this how you do it? Like, is this how you go about saying, I'm sick and tired, I'm done with this? Or do you just keep quiet and let I don't know, if she's really done, do you let the lawyers handle it? Like, what's the best way to, I don't know, I wouldn't say expose the cheater, but what's the best thing you can do if you in this situation?
I think with her, like, the only collateral damage I'm seeing here is the kids, right? Like, I don't think we'd be having this discussion if Sonya and Matthew didn't have kids, because then it would just be for her to deal with. But now it's like, oh snap, dog, I saw what your mom posted last night, you know? That is what they got to deal with now. So that's the worst of it.
But she said she's waiting for children to finish to write the exam. She's still gonna put everything out there. She's gonna keep out files like she have.
Oh wait, she's not done.
She's not done actually. I saw last night on her Facebook she was still posting that woman on the gym clothes. She's been sweating, this woman, eh? She was sweating. Hey. Yeah,
and also, Mama Jane, she also spoke to the financial advisor, remember? And then now the problem is financial advisor is saying, hubby's been digging into your kids' education money to play Papa provider, to be the the blesser, to be Mr. Blesser. So again, these are the things where I'm just like, man, he there was a point where he literally must have tuned out, because how do you do all this stuff and think, you're gonna get away with it. It's the narcissism, the arrogance is just out of this world. And so,
Has he said anything since she's been posting this stuff?
Nah.
No, he has not.
Nah.
But the friend in question has dropped a video, and she's just like, it was her gymming, and basically the essence of that video was like, we move. Don't let this bother you. We shake it off and we continue. So from that point of view, we kind of see that she's not fazed, she's not moved by the fact that they're trending, and she's just like, it's another Tuesday for me.
But don't forget that Sonya, she's a strong woman. She will come back and she will fight back, and she's doing that. Sonya, she's a strong woman, and I trust her. She'll stand and fight back.
What would you do, Jane? What would you do in this situation?
Yeah, Babaji. Mina, at this time, I don't know. There will be, or maybe they will already call ambulance for me. Otherwise, all those comments, I saw comments on Twitter. People are taking her, they're calling her names, but I don't think she care about that, because she knew exactly what she was doing when she posted all of those things. She went. I think maybe she was tired, Babaji. Sometimes, if you are tired, you just say, let the world know what these men do. Because sometimes if you divorce your husband, people, they will blame you. They will not know all the side of the story. They will say maybe Sonya was there for the money, because now Booth doesn't have a money. Sonya, that's why she's leaving Booth. No. That's why she was like, let me just keep all the files and tell people what's going on.
I think she didn't want to be the only Popeye. Jane. She didn't want to be the only Popeye. She wanted to show everyone that everyone must see.
I'm saluting her for what she did. Because women are dying in the marriage. Women, they stay in the marriage while they are not happy. They're just staying there for the children. You just say, let me just stay there for my children. Because my children love their father. And now look at what you can't sleep at night while your man is cheating. I don't want to lie to you. You can't sleep while people, they're telling you all the time. Look at the pictures, the one that people took while he was in Limpopo, sitting there with that lady, putting the scarf on their neck. I was like, this dude, how can you do that to your wife? You left your wife at home and you lied and you say you're going to fetch something where you can't do, and then you're going to Limpopo. Why?
I mean, I think Matthew Naye doesn't know about Gonchies. Do you know what a Gonchie is?
What is Gonchies?
Papa G. A Gonchie is a hole in the wall kind of place, right? So there's a lot of Gonchies in Joburg. It's like restaurants you go to where they have a table at the back.
At the back,
and no one's going to see you. No one's going to see you.
Yeah.
You know? So
what is the term Gonchie? I've seen this shit happen. Listen, I've been out to lunch and breakfast and dinner before, and I've seen a couple sitting in a corner, and you either think, well, either these two have just started a relationship, or they don't want other people to see because they've chosen
exactly.
Especially at the stadium. Look at that at the stadium. If we take a side chick to the stadium, people, they're doing that. They're staying at the back. If the camera facing you, you just hide your face like that.
Hey,
but they already take the pictures. I've been seeing that on the stadium when I'm watching the soccer. You check the side chick to the stadium. The cameraman is gonna go straight to you. Because they can see that you're doing things that you're not supposed to do.
Well, let's go to a couple of comments here and just wrap up this conversation, because we could talk about this all day. There's so many interesting things about this. I love what Red Robin says. When a man steals your wife, there is no better revenge than to let him keep her. And obviously that goes the opposite way as well. If a woman steals your man, there's no better revenge than to let her have him. Do you agree with that?
No, for sure.
Yeah.
100%. But the thing is, now that it's come to light, you wonder if it's as attractive to them, right? There's something about it being clandestine and in the shadows. In the shadows, we all see the actions outwardly, but sometimes the part of the attraction is that, we're being naughty. And now that it's out, you wonder if that diminishes any of the sexiness of the whole thing, right? Now that people know, you might be like, ugh, I don't know, I don't want to do this anymore.
Let's just be clear about this. We would not, I would not want to be talking about this if it was a private situation that only we knew about, that maybe Sonya told us friends.
For sure.
It's none of our business, and we have no business getting involved in their relationship. But she chose to put this on the internet, and therefore, she's got to take the good with the bad.
Right.
It's obviously Jane, you said she knows what she's doing. I'm not so sure that going to the internet is the best choice, but Yonda says maybe she did this for public opinion, for when she wants to clean him out. It's a smart strategy, actually. This way, it'll show that he was the one who screwed up.
Yonda's right. That's why, and that's why I'm saying it's the hope of I thing, right? Is that you're making me a clown, is what Sonya's thinking. I'm going to show everybody that you've been duping us all by being the stand-up guy who's just, So she wanted to say, hey, guys, that Matthew you think you know, this is the real Matthew. And so to have the court of public opinion on her side. Obviously, a lot of people who are against her are probably just not fans of her approach as to how she did it. Because she went, full-blown, like, harakiri with this one.
Here's a question.
Whatever.
Like, here's something interesting. And this just proves that there's no sense in this. Sanele says, what baffles me about guys is that they will cheat with a woman that is less attractive and trashier than their wife. It makes no sense to me.
That's true.
Again, but we're not talking about this one in particular. But I've seen this happen too, right?
But this thing happened all the time, Papa G.
But Mama Jane, it always boils down to what is that person doing for you that your actual partner isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's that 80-20 rule? It's like, Kohai, he's got the 80%, but there's that 20%, whether it's a kink, whether it's a, whatever that falls into that you might not be getting at home. And some people do that.
We got to wrap this up. Simpiwe has the last word.
So I was going to say that I recently went to a Eugene Koza show, right? And his entire show was about the side chick. And his opening line was like, behind every successful marriage is a beautiful side chick who's holding it together. And like all the ladies in that room are just like, how dare you? But maybe there's some truth to it.
Listen, there are some people who know how to cheat better. There's some people who know how to cheat better. They know their Gonchies. They know how to, keep everything going at home, but they still have that person outside. Heck, there's people who have whole apartments for their.
You must wipe your mouth. When you finish do all of this, wipe your mouth. Wipe and just like they say, women they cheat, but we'll never see them. But men, when they cheat, they just want to do some show-offs. Wipe your mouth.
There's something about most of these guys that when they do this, they want to be caught. It's almost like that's part of the game as they leave little telltale signs, and women will.
So do you think it's a cry for help, G?
No, that's
a cry for help. He's like, hey guys, this is what I'm actually going through something here.
No, Cunning Stunt says it better than me. Matthew will go looking for another sneaky on the side. Now his addiction is in the hiding. It's keeping it secret. You get these people who have a whole double life, right? They lead this double life where they've got one family in this town and they've got another family in this town. This happens.
No, those are the masters. Those are the masters. Like, that's amazing.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. Those guys, but they always get caught. Always. Yeah. And it always ends badly. So listen, let's wrap this up by saying, obviously, we hope Sonya's all right. We hope the kids are all right.
Yeah.
Whether or not she's made the right decision, we all are entitled to have an opinion on this because she's put it in the public space. But Jane, thank you for your participation today, and we will catch up with you again soon. There's Jane Malachi. For those people who've been waiting for Jane, we thought this was a good opportunity because she had a lot to say about this morning. So thank you, Jane. Good to have you on the show. All right, we got to look at some headlines. There's quite a lot going on. And I want to quickly get to some of these because we don't want this morning to just be about gossip. Let's start off with a notorious Nigerian fraudster who's been jailed for 11 years in the United States. Now, you never hear about this. This guy's name was Hushpuppi.
Oh, yeah, Hushpuppi. He's famous.
You know about him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's Insta famous. Like,
right.
Yeah.
He has lots of cars and wealth and all kinds of things that people have been talking about him. He is famous. I've got a picture of him here with two Bentleys. Sorry, a Bentley and a Rolls Royce that I'll put up, just so you know that this guy had like tons and tons of money and afraid to show it. I've always said, and we said this just yesterday, I think, that the funny thing about these people who share all this stuff on social media is they somehow think that the tax authorities aren't going to find them when they are putting pictures like this. He's in a
Imagine.
Versace gown. Obviously, this is in Miami
Dubai.
or some. Is
I
it
think it's
Dubai?
Dubai. Yeah, it's Dubai. Look at the number plate above the W is a Dubai.
Ah, very good. He's got these
Yeah.
Bentleys and Rolls Royces, and he's living large. But the guy is stupid because they've caught him. So apparently, this is the whole story. His real name is Raymond Abbas. He was ordered to pay $1.732 million in restitution to 2 victims. He rose to fame flaunting his wealthy lifestyle, which boasted 2.8 million followers. I've got to ask this question, like, why would anyone follow a guy like this? But it all came crashing down when he was arrested in Dubai. According to Don Alway, the assistant director of the FBI's Los Angeles field office, he had, behind the glitz of his account, become one of the most prolific money launderers in the world. He leveraged social media to gain notoriety and to brag about his wealth. He used to conduct business email compromise scams, online bank heists, and other cyber-enabled fraud that financially ruined scores of victims. So you always wonder, who are these people behind the scams? Well, this is the guy, right?
There we go. But I think there's a lot of other people behind who are just a lot smarter than him, like who wouldn't lean into the public, social media thing as heavily as he did. It's just bizarre when your money is ill-gotten gains and you're like, hey guys, let's have a look. And it's like, what? Are you crazy? Like, I don't know. So I think a lot of scammers rather just kind of secretly enjoy their money. He's the one where he just caved to the pressure. And that's what, Instagram is. It's like, hey, man, look how I'm living. And you can't do that when you're a criminal. The influencer pressure.
No, because I don't think he was an influencer before he was a scammer. I think he was a scammer and then became an influencer. And that's the thing.
Exactly it.
But that's the thing. He first got the money illegally, and then he was like, "Oh, let me show this off." There was no pressure to show it off. No one was like, "Show us the Bentleys." We never asked for it until it was given to us.
It's pressure from people who have the kind of money that he did, right?
Like whether they had like legitimate way.
Exactly. But he's probably saying that he saw another criminal who's maybe a bit more smarter than him doing the same thing. Because let's be honest, a lot of the time, people who get money illegally are the ones buying the bottles in the clubs, are the ones pitching up in 5 million rand cars when you're like, what do you do? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I've always been told by people who work in the club industries that, listen, don't ever cave to the pressure of the bottles around you, because most of the people spending that money didn't get that money in the way that you and I get money. So there's a whole other world that exists where it's like, so I think Hushpuppi just wanted to belong to those guys and was like, hey guys, I can also play. Look at me.
Yeah,
and that was his downfall.
It's a desperate need to belong, and this idea that obviously if you have money, then you're a better person than someone else. That a lot of people believe that, and he's obviously one of those people. So you've got to ask, if these people just spent a 50th of that money going for therapy, they would not only be able to keep their money and have a great life, but they'd also feel better about themselves. They just can't help it though, because they see other people showing off and they feel, I have to join this party, right? Buy the bottles, drive the cars, get the whores and all that kind of shit that they like to. I had to throw in get the whores there because I'm feeling like. So I'm going to show you a picture now, and you tell me who you think this person is. Who is that old man?
Oh man, that is Sepp. That's Sepp Blatter. My word.
That's correct. I knew you would get it, Kamo. So Kamo's right. It's Sepp Blatter, who's now 86 years old. Guess what he's suddenly said? He's come out in the BBC this morning saying awarding Qatar the tournament was a mistake.
What?
Oh,
you
gosh.
lie.
Oh.
Get out of here.
He's one to talk, man. Come on, Sepp. Come on, Sepp.
Wait, did he not say something similar when it came to the South African World Cup, that we kind of got it, not the rightful way a couple of years ago?
No. So the thing with Sepp, right? And this is why if you bump into any African football administrator, they love him. And it's a weird relationship because he was always going to bat for Africa, but it was always kind of in lieu of what's happening on the back end, right? So this is the thing. He was always kind of like, he pushed for an African World Cup. So a lot of African football administrators love him because he was the kind of, because he was there, things kind of got swung in our favor. but you then have to wonder, like, what was that relationship based on? Was it just because, hey man, you're a stand-up guy, I'm a stand-up guy, we're mates? But of course not, so it's a strange one. Like, if you ever want to get like a sense of how important he was to certain people, just speak to any African football administrator and they'll be like, oh man, Sepp, he was one of ours, he was fighting for us.
Essentially, this was corruption done right. That's what you say.
Yeah, to some people. To some people, the ends justifies the means, right? It's like, well...
Would I want things to go differently in 2010 so that we didn't have the World Cup? Obviously, no. It was the excuse we needed. We didn't know we needed it at the time, but it was the excuse we needed to get our roads right, to get infrastructure built. I mean, all of us are thrilled that happened, down to a man, right? But this guy's as twisted and corrupt as all of them, if not worse. He says it was a mistake. He was the president when they were awarded the tournament in 2010. The Gulf state has been criticized for its stance on same-sex relationships, human rights, the treatment of migrant workers. Blatter said he was right to have said at the time that the tournament should not go to Qatar for 2022. I don't know if he's changing his story now, but the Swiss guy was speaking, that's him, Blatter was speaking on BBC Radio 5. And in an interview, he added that Qatar is too small of a country to host the tournament and that the football and the World Cup are too big for it. So Qatar are going to be really pissed off with him after this.
Well, he's immaterial now, unfortunately, for Sepp. Like, banned from the space. And so, obviously the new regime at FIFA are trying very hard to kind of clear the stench of Sepp.
That's a good point. He was banned from football by FIFA for 8 years. That was later reduced to 6 over the Platini payment, which, of course, was the next president, right? Michael Platini. He then received an additional ban until 2028 for various violations of their code of ethics. So he is persona non grata in FIFA. Yeah. Despite, I'm sure he's got plenty of money out of FIFA, right?
Of course.
For sure. I mean, he was, and maybe that's why the African football administrators liked him. He was like a dictator. He stayed in power probably longer than he should have. Seats like that, you do want to kind of keep them rotating, but he ended up being a law unto himself, and evidently thought he'd never get caught. Up until
he was definitely president of our country for most of 2010. Definitely. He was in charge. Do you remember he used to call the shots and then everybody here would just kowtow and they'd say, sure, President Sepp, whatever you need. So I'm not surprised. But I can't believe how old he's got. I mean, he is 86. So there he is, Sepp Blatter. I didn't even recognize him.
And court cases will age you, man. Like, it's also that whole thing of like, I have to account now.
There's one exception to that court cases will age you rule. Jacob Zuma looks exactly the same now.
Because that man doesn't take them seriously. That's why you must laugh. Don't take anything in life serious, and you'll age backwards.
You'll Benjamin Button your way for the rest of your days.
Rebel Wilson has announced the birth of her daughter via a surrogate. Rebel Wilson, of course, the famous actress. She has shared pictures of her newborn baby on social media. And she says that this baby is obviously a source of great joy to her. She thanked the gorgeous surrogate for helping her to have her own family. I don't know whether we have any business digging around here to find out why she had to have a surrogate and she couldn't give birth to the kid herself. But either way, she's posted this. She says, beyond proud to announce the birth of my first child, Royce Lillian, who was born this past week. I can't even describe the love I have for her. Blah, blah, blah. I wanted to particularly thank my gorgeous surrogate who carried her and birthed her with such grace and care. Thank you for helping me with my own family. The best gift. I am ready to give little Royce all the love imaginable. I'm learning quickly. Blah, 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 blah. So surrogacy, this happened in the UK. It's illegal to advertise for a surrogate. It's also illegal for third parties to profit from matching. In the US, commercial surrogacy is legal in many places, but can cost a lot of money. The number of parents having a baby via surrogate quadrupled in the 10 years up to 2021, and 2/3 of applicants are now mixed sex couples, often in their 30s and 40s. So does that mean like gay couples?
Yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah. Huh.
Oh, there we go. She said once that she is in a relationship with a female who's so she's in a same-sex relationship. That's why she wanted a surrogate in this case. I was just
Yeah.
trying to find a reason why,
All
you
right.
know. So that's the reason. She is in a relationship with a woman, and this woman is a fashion designer called Ramona Agruma. And she said, I thought I was searching for a Disney prince, but maybe what I needed all this time was a Disney princess. Before she went
Aw.
public about the fact that she was in a new relationship, she was accused of trying to out Wilson as gay. The other girl. So that's interesting. There's a lot of controversy around that, but here's Rebel Wilson happy that she's finally got a kid, and good for her. So there's some
Good
news
for
on that.
her. Yeah.
All right. Anything you want to throw in at the last minute? Because we've got to get to David Smith and the US elections, which I know a lot of people are excited about. That's coming up next. Go for it, Kamo.
I mean, I was speaking to Simpiwa yesterday, and I was just like, I think what for me was, something I wanted to kind of touch on was in terms of, is there anything you've gotten into? Because I'm a big gamer, right? So I just want to know if gaming has led to other kind of, going down the rabbit hole. I know, for instance, I didn't care about baseball at all up until I started playing baseball video games. And now, obviously, the World Series just kind of ended with the Houston Astros. And man, it's weird because I also managed to get my 14-year-old cousin into it, right? Because we were sitting one day and we were watching, there was a game on. And so I started explaining stuff to him. Lo and behold, I went off to go do something. I came back and he was still glued to his seat. And he was like, man, this is interesting, So I'm just wondering if you've ever kind of gone down a rabbit hole because of, a hobby that kind of started out as one thing, because obviously now there's a lot of people who cosplay. There's Rage next month happening up here in Jersey, which I think is going to be great.
Absolutely.
And I think it's exciting to have something in December because less and less people, I think, are doing the trek to the coast, right? I think a lot more people are staying in Joburg from an economic and just like a space thing. I like Joburg in December. There's more space. It feels like, you can just drive. It's nice and quiet. The only thing that sucks is some of your favorite restaurants may be closed, but, the other guys who stay open tend to kill it because there's nowhere else to go. So, I just wonder if anyone has kind of discovered a whole lifestyle just from starting from something as innocuous as maybe even Candy Crush. I mean, I installed a game on my phone for the first time 4 days ago. There's this new game called Marvel Snap. It's remember Snap back in the day, Snap the card game. So now you can play with Marvel characters, and I must tell you, it's quite addicting. I mean, it's quite addictive.
There's a lot here that we've got to talk about. First of all, totally agree about being in Joburg over December. We've brought that up a couple of times on the show. Totally agree. It's a great place to be over December. It's quiet.
Yep.
There's a lot of chilled energy, which you don't find in Joburg easily. And I like that about December.
It becomes like a dorpy.
I can't believe that gaming got you into the World Series. I mean, it's something so outside of South Africa that most South Africans couldn't care less about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, World Series makes it sound a lot more grandiose than it is, right? It's just it should be the North America Finals, because but it is in terms of a spectacle. Once again, I also watch these things just to see from a broadcast perspective how it's done, and there's so many things because with these Americans. Sports have so much downtime that Americans have become very good at filling that time. So I'm always keen to see what's the latest trick in filling time. And so you just watch these things and you just realize that, okay, they're getting better at integrating social media. They're getting better at you'll be watching something and between an inning, they'll have a little 2-minute piece with original footage of someone starting at 10 years old and getting to where they are. And then they cut to the guy at the plate. It's just, it's just tricks like that where you're like, wow, okay, that's smart.
You're on mute,
Gareth. So, look, we've got to get you back in here sometime because there's obviously plenty to talk about. But Simpiwa, just quickly, you went to Eugene Kwaza's show. You just dropped that in just now.
Yes,
must have been pretty good because we had Eugene on last Thursday and he was amazing and people are still raving about him. So a good show. You enjoyed it?
I absolutely enjoyed it. Eugene is hilarious, but let me quickly tell you what happened after the show as we're leaving. Ryan and myself, we got spotted. Someone recognized us from the show. And I was just like, hold up. Am I a celebrity now? Like, do I need to start charging for my appearance here? Like, I mean,
Can I get a selfie?
I mean, it was weird because for the first second, I was like, do I know this person? Like, and he was like, oh, no, I see you on the show. And I was like, oh, okay. How are you?
Well,
are you good? Are you great? So yeah, that was amazing. That was just
I'm sorry, but this is going to happen to you more and more. It's the price you have to pay. Ask Kamal.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
On TV and radio for long enough to know that this
I get like a lot of the time it's like, hey, didn't I go to school with you? And I'm like, no, you didn't. you did not go to school with me. Okay. And it's a lot of the time it's because you came home after school and we maybe hung out for a couple of hours, but no, so it's people tie me to their schooling experience because I was the guy on after school when you got home. So KTV I get that a lot.
You were man. Kid. You were one of the first ones. So just quickly to wrap up all of this morning, Sanele says, Joburg is the best Gonchie in
Exactly. The Gonchie spaces multiply. Like, I mean, I live in the South. So when my friends are looking for ways to escape from the Madden crowd, I tell them about all the cool Gonchies in here. I'm like, hey, man, if you want to cheat with a good peri-peri chicken in front of you, I know just the place.
Right, get out of your own neighborhood if you're going to.
Exactly. That's the first start. That's like first. You got to get out your own neighborhood because people will know you and they'll see you.
Is give people tips and tricks on how to cheat better. We can wrap up the first hour now. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody.
They're gonna do it anyway. We'll
be back with David Smith next, talking U.S. elections. All of that and more on the way. And don't go anywhere.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Yeah, great question. So we, as a portfolio, we're called Smarter Mobility Africa. So we focus purely on the mobility industry, and we cover a number of different events. And one of those is Smarter Mobility Africa Summit, which is the conference and exhibition side of what we do. And it's really about bringing together the whole mobility industry. So all different spheres, the automotive sector, the public transport sector, walking and cycling, data mapping, GIS, the whole industry together. So it's bringing that industry together and then really discussing, celebrating challenges, opportunities within the industry, technology, innovations, different case studies and solutions. And we do that through conference format and then an exhibition.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Well, it's US elections, midterm elections today, which means that we've got to get some opinion from someone who's in the United States. Just last week, we spoke to Joel Pollak from Breitbart, and today we're going to speak to Andrew Smith from The Guardian, getting you two very different opinions on what is going on in the elections today. We'll see who's going to win at some point in the next couple of hours. Stick around for that. But first, here is David Smith from The Guardian in the UK, someone who was the African correspondent for The Guardian for a long time. He knows both South Africa and he knows the United States of America. Take a listen to what he has to say. Well, it is election day in the US, and that means midterm elections today. Many people go to the polls either to decide who the governor or the senator or some House of Representatives member they're voting for. And obviously down ballot from that, because it's the United States, they choose judges, they choose the local dog catcher, they choose pretty much everybody that they need to in their local and state elections too. And because it's very, very difficult to get a grip on these things, and so many people are interested in what happens, of course, they always say that America makes the decisions and then the rest of the world deals with the ramifications. Whether that's true or not, whether the American empire is truly at its end or not, remains to be seen. But someone who I suspect has a firm opinion on this because he's been watching these things for many years now. He has also been a man here in Africa who has given information to the rest of the world about what's been happening. He is the Washington correspondent for The Guardian, and from 2010 to 2015, he was the African correspondent for The Guardian. He was based in Johannesburg during that time. That's where I got to know him. And he is in Washington now on election day. David Smith, what a pleasure to see you. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Absolutely. Now, it's probably no surprise to my listeners or to anyone who's read The Guardian that you and I are likely to have completely different points of view on politics, both in America and everywhere else. But as I've often said to people, and America's currently at the point of deciding on some major direction, but you can be friends. There are still people like you and I who can talk to each other and have fun and have interesting conversations without absolutely despising each other. Do you think you've ever seen America as polarized as it is now, though?
No, and actually, when I interview Americans who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, many of them will say they've never seen it as polarized as this. The closest comparison, maybe the 1960s, the protests over the Vietnam War, the civil unrest there was in major cities. That was pretty divisive, but you'll hear a lot of historians say this is the worst it's been since the American Civil War in the 1860s. And now you even hear serious people wonder if there could be a second civil war in America, which was the kind of thing that was unthinkable when I was growing up. Just deep polarization over many, many issues, including abortion rights, voting rights, just culturally, socially. And you've seen it in this midterm election again, two parties campaigning on really two different sets of issues. It's really a split screen, and it's hard to see what's going to bring the country back together.
So let's talk first about, because I mean, there's no point really in getting into too many of the results, because by the time we broadcast this, which will only be a few hours from now, we'll have a lot more clarity and a lot can change during election day in terms of results. But what do you think's on the ballot here? Because you mentioned abortion. The Democrats seem to be playing that card quite hard at the moment. They're also saying that if you don't vote for us, basically it's the end of democracy. Do you think there's any credence to that? And what are the main issues that are affecting most voters? And what do you think they'll go to the polls and vote for or against?
Well, this election has been described as abortion versus inflation, and I think that's one framing in terms of the party priorities and what people are voting for. Most opinion polls suggest that, as usual, the economy is paramount here, and in particular, very negative perceptions of the economy. I think there was one survey, around 80-90% of people thought the economy was heading in the wrong direction, and indeed, there are some predictions of a recession in the US, just like around the world. Inflation is about 8.5%, and usually when that happens, people tend to blame party in power, i.e. Joe Biden and the Democrats. So I think that will be the prevailing factor. Republicans have also pushed a lot on crime, which is rising in some major cities, not as much as they would have you believe. But certainly there's already some internal debate among Democrats about whether they've really failed to tackle that issue. And again, a familiar playbook being seen as soft on crime. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, particularly over the summer, they certainly made hay with abortion rights as an issue. Of course, in June, the Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortion, Roe versus Wade, after nearly half a century. There's some clear evidence that that led to an increase in the number of women registering to vote. It certainly energized the party and certainly may still be a factor on election day. And yes, as you mentioned, Democrats, including Barack Obama recently on the campaign trail, are arguing that democracy is on the ballot. This is the first general election since a mob of Donald Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol on January the 6th, 2021. It's the first major test of American democracy since then. And Joe Biden himself says that more than 300 so-called election deniers, people who believe Trump won that election and might game future elections, they are running for important offices this time. So certainly there are many who believe that this could be a big blow to American democracy if a lot of these conspiracy theorists actually become Secretary of State and governor and other posts in various states. But interesting, what we're seeing in the polling and the surveys is that not enough Americans take the democracy issue seriously for it to determine their vote. You certainly see some surveys that suggest people are more concerned about the economy than they are about the future of democracy.
Well, the Democrats have changed their strategy a number of times during this campaign. You mentioned Barack Obama, and let's just start there and we can look through some of the others. I mean, it's strange to me that they keep trotting him out. Clearly, Biden's not having the effect that they hoped he would. I don't think they can rely on Kamala Harris for the similar reason that they can't rely on Joe Biden. And maybe I'm being unkind, but who is their main go-to guy when it comes to trying to energize people? Because if you draw on poor old Barack Obama every time, and listen, we all, I think, are in complete agreement that this guy has some spectacular oratory skills. He still has an enormous amount of support. You know, he was a president who managed to get a lot of votes from straight up Republicans in his first election term, in his first 4-year term. But if they're drawing on him, is this not an admission that they've really screwed up the strategy? You've already kind of hinted at the abortion thing, but Obama being called back, is this desperation?
Yes, to a degree. And I think there's a lot going on there. Firstly, Joe Biden is turning 80 later this month. His approval rating is pretty low, in the 40s. He's not an especially popular president. And so we've seen him actually deliberately avoiding some of the key battleground states. I think some of the candidates there fear that he would be a drag on them. He would be a hindrance rather than a help. So he's campaigning, including last night in Maryland, in states where Democrats are already well on the way to victory. Similarly, Kamala Harris, she's been doing some rallies, not especially popular. It's all in a huge contrast to Donald Trump, who, whether candidates want him or not, invites himself to these battlegrounds and does mobilize, does whip up big crowds, although certainly there are some cases where he's a hindrance rather than a help. And meanwhile, Barack Obama remains the undoubted star of the Democratic Party. I saw him give a speech in Atlanta, Georgia. It was very electrifying. It certainly overshadowed Joe Biden. Obama has the gift of oratory. And I would say, in fact, right now, Obama is in his prime. He's better than ever at the age of 61. I think he's really been liberated from the cares of the White House, of office. That crown can wear heavily. Now it's Obama unbound. He's energized. He's using a sense of humor, an easy, relaxed manner. He's found a way to be punchy and pugnacious in going after Republicans, and I think a lot of other Democrats could learn from that. So yes, he's the Democrats' not so secret weapon, but will it make that much difference? We'll have to see.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought Trump up, because he just can't help himself, huh? I mean, it was a day to go until the elections today. The Republicans are looking quite strong in all kinds of places for all kinds of reasons. And he just can't help but insert himself right into the middle of the conversation, take up all the space in the room, and like a big baby, say me, 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 because he couldn't even resist staying away from Ron DeSantis, who, for whatever reason, seems to be gaining a lot of traction. There are good reasons for that. Some people think they're not necessarily good reasons, but Trump just can't handle it. It isn't about him. And where he could have waited until after the midterms, and with a pretty successful looking Republican slate, he had to make it about him this time again. He's just got no discipline, huh?
Correct. He's been described as a malignant narcissist, and I think that's fair. He's a child playing with matches. It's all about him and his ego. I went to a campaign rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. Officially, it was for the candidates Doug Mastriano for governor and Mehmet Oz for the Senate. But of course, it was all about Trump. And he arrived on a Boeing 757. It had the word Trump written in huge dog letters on the side. It's nicknamed Trump Force One, and he delivered such a showman manner. This plane came to a halt where he was speaking at the rally, so that for people in this small town where, frankly, not a lot happens, this was the idea of here's a king, here's an emperor, literally descending from the sky on his jet, going to spread some stardust, bring his celebrity and fame. He gave a speech for literally 2 hours. A bit of it was about the Senate governor candidates, but the vast majority, of course, was about him and his grievances, and teasing a run for president in 2024, which I think is now a certainty. And yes, it does risk undermining some of the Republican candidates this time. We'll have to see how the candidates that he endorsed does. But yes, Trump has dominated American politics for the past 6 or 7 years, and it looks like we're going to have at least another 2 of those when he runs for the White House.
Yeah, and as you mentioned Joe Biden's age, it makes me think that, well, Donald Trump is also going to be 80 by the time he does run for a second term, if that's what he decides to do. Now, if we can just refer to 1 or 2 other issues that were on the ballot this year, and you mentioned abortion. I mean, in truth, despite the overturning of Roe v. Wade, what they really did is kick that back to the states. And most of the states that were pro-abortion have not changed any of their rules. Most of the states that were anti have not changed any of their rules. Not a lot has actually changed on the ground. And for women who are concerned about these things, the Republicans did try to make a federal law a little while ago, but it didn't work. And what they were going for there was something like a 20-week limit, which is what we have here in South Africa. It's what many European countries have. So it's not that extreme. So when you see a lot of these candidates going out and saying, oh, well, abortion's on the ballot, and this message can only really apply to half the population, because it is mostly women concerned with this, unfortunately. So it's probably not the smartest strategy if that's what you're going to lead with. And maybe that's why they've changed their tune so many times.
Well, the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned, I went outside the Supreme Court, and I could tell you the passions, the emotions, the fury was running very high. There were thousands of women and men incensed by this. I mean, just think about it. And I remember from my days in South Africa, the importance of the Constitution, what a tremendous document the South African Constitution is, and rightly there's great pride in it, as there is in the American one. This was the first time in history that a constitutional right had actually been taken away from people. I mean, it's just really extraordinary. And actually, we have seen several states already moving to have near or total bans on abortion. On the other side, actually, some of the democratic states that are pro-abortion rights are actually strengthening that. So we're seeing a further polarization in America. And there does seem to be Republican hypocrisy on this issue, because just a few weeks ago, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina proposed a national abortion ban 15 weeks after conception. Some Republicans really think that could backfire on them. It could energize women and Democratic voters to turn out. It's far from clear whether such a proposal would ever get support, but certainly some of the predictions appear to be coming true, that Republicans said we want to throw this to the states, and then about 5 minutes later, they're already mobilizing for a national abortion ban, which is ridiculous. By the way, favored by Mike Pence, the former vice, who may well be running against Trump in 2024. He makes no bones about it. He favors a national abortion ban. So I think people see a slippery slope here.
Well, I mean, Trump got close to intimating that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he were hanged not so long ago as part of all that January 6th noise. Now, just to go back to that for a second, I mean, we talk about election deniers, and this is, this term has been used for climate deniers. It comes from Holocaust denier, obviously, which is something which has real roots. But it appears to me that this election denier thing is a problem on the Democrat side too. Hillary Clinton has been touring anywhere that'll have her for the last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, explaining why she actually won in 2016. We found out subsequently that all of that stuff about, the Russian campaign to get Donald Trump elected was more or less ineffective nonsense, and there's no proof or evidence of the fact that he was peeing on hookers or any such thing. We've also discovered that people like Stacey Abrams in Georgia, who's been claiming to be the governor there forever, and every Democrat that is asked this question says, oh no, she definitely won it. These are the same people who have a problem with election deniers, 300 of them or so, as you mentioned earlier, on the ballot. Is that also not a bit of hypocrisy?
Maybe a smidgen, but I think we're talking about two very different things, really. This is not symmetrical. It's not 50 on one side, 50 on the other, 6 on one, half a dozen on the other. There are a few cases of Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams making remarks that perhaps now they regret in the current climate. It's not even remotely comparable to the concerted, coordinated, organized effort on the Republican side to mobilize members of Congress who voted not to recognize Joe Biden's election, who mobilized lawyers to take this to courts and the Supreme Court, and perhaps most obviously of all, literally mobilized an angry armed mob to attempt a coup at the US Capitol on January the 6th. I mean, Hillary Clinton is not doing that. Stacey Abrams is not doing that. So I think ultimately this is a classic case of whataboutism, where it's the Republican playbook to do something wild and insane and possibly criminal, and then point to the other side and say, yeah, but 10 years ago, you said this once. And it's just not comparing like with like. It's just not it's just not the equivalent.
I couldn't agree with you more in terms of some of these things that people are saying, but it does appear to me that there seems to be some kind of a double standard. I heard historian Michael Beschloss asked on, I think it was on MSNBC the other day, and he's actually the presidential historian. He said basically, if the Republicans get in now, they will kill your children in this interview. And I suddenly thought, well, this is a bit of extremism. This is a little bit of alarmism, if nothing else. But he doesn't see it that way, and he's a historian. So I'm a little bit worried that there seem to be people more and more pulled to the extremes of their various camps, and that there's no room for people to have civil arguments about these things anymore. If democracy really is on the ballot, that doesn't mean that Republicans are coming to kill your children. And similarly, if the Democrats do end up pulling an amazing trick out of the bag here, are we going to have either party after this claiming that this election was fraudulent, that there was low voter turnout, that there was rigging? Is that going to happen?
I think there's a great danger of that. And yes, in the current atmosphere of polarization, there is a danger of both sides overreaching, including Democrats sometimes with some very apocalyptic portraits. And during 4 years of the Donald Trump presidency, every tweet was treated as if it was the end of the world. One political pollster that I talk to sometimes describes these as Armageddon elections, where both sides regard it and portray it as victory is everything. And if
they keep saying this is the most important election of our lifetimes every 2 years, not even 4.
And if we lose, then it's total catastrophe. It's the end of the world as we know it. Now, I think Democrats have some grounds for saying a bit of that this time, given these election deniers on the march. I mean, who knows how extreme and far out the Republican Party could become. But yes, Joe Biden, others are still aiming for some kind of middle ground, some kind of dialogue, some way to bring it back to civility before this country just goes off the rails. And it's very difficult in an atmosphere of cable news and social media that really incentivizes extremism, incentivizes saying the most outrageous thing, your opponent. Obviously, Trump has poured oil on all those flames. So a lot of people are struggling for what's the answer here to bring America back to just something like normal.
I've seen quite a lot of reports and opinion pieces on how COVID and the handling of COVID seems to have been a major thing that people haven't forgotten about. A lot of people whose kids were at home with them for a year, maybe more, who were shut into their houses largely. They couldn't go to the beach. They couldn't do a whole bunch of things. And it is more or less the Democrats who had the most stringent and most draconian laws during COVID to kind of restrict people's movement, restrict their rights to go to church, to school, that kind of thing, mask mandates, vaccine mandates. These are the kinds of things that the Democrats prided themselves on at the beginning, and they were pushing for then President Trump and after that President Biden to be as strict as possible with these kinds of things. Do you think there's a lot of anger from people who haven't forgotten this stuff and remember who did this to them and now want some kind of retribution by voting them out?
Yes, I think it's certainly there in the background for a lot of Republican voters. And if you go to a Trump rally, certainly Dr. Anthony Fauci, the chief medical advisor, is demonized, and there's talk of dragging him to Capitol Hill for investigations. I mean, I do think people have a pretty short memory here. Donald Trump was the president when a lot of these restrictions were put in place. And actually, America, even in democratic cities and states, was pretty relaxed and laid back compared to the UK and other countries in Europe. And my understanding, probably more relaxed than South Africa from what I've gathered. I mean, in Britain, for example, there were rules that you couldn't even leave your home unless you were exercising. In China, obviously, there's still very good restrictions. And America, being America with its culture, its history of individual freedom, never went that far. So yes, schools were closed, some businesses were, but you could still go out and about, you could still go shopping, you could still do a lot of things compared to the rest of the world.
Well, it was objectively true that the blue states were much more pro these COVID moves than the red states were.
Oh, sure. But, the bottom line here is that, some people would argue America should have actually been more strict rather than less strict. And they would point to a death toll of more than 1 million people. America's performance during the pandemic was terrible by global standards.
More of whom again by the numbers died while Biden was president than Trump, and that was with the vaccine.
Sure, because Biden's been in office for a longer period now, comparatively with the pandemic.
But it's interesting that the Democrats are not mentioning anything to do with COVID at all. They're desperate to avoid it because they know they've lost on this issue.
Yeah, I think Republicans have certainly weaponized it, and just culturally now, I know there's a short memory, there's amnesia. There's a lot of people will say, why did we close schools for so long? And certainly, kids' test results did suffer as a result of that. This is a society where people want to carry their guns. Freedom is really integral to it. So any government interference is always treated with default skepticism. And I agree. And you could have a debate over, Donald Trump actually, one of the few good things he did was investing in vaccines and he got them going. But you could also say, but Joe Biden did well to implement them and run a massive national program of vaccines and testing. But to be honest, interestingly, neither side is really at the forefront of this election. People people are so determined to move on from the pandemic that I think the economy, inflation, abortion, other things are ultimately going to take precedence over that. But on potentially interesting footnote is that I've seen it argued that if we do see a Republican primary election in 2024 between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, then DeSantis might be able to attack Trump over pandemic restrictions because Trump did approve some on medical advice, and DeSantis has made a big thing about being pro-freedom and anti-restrictions and so on. And DeSantis might be able to argue that he was working in the interest of his people, and even Trump bowed to Dr. Fauci on this one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will hold him responsible for going along with the science and the experts at that point, all of whom have really disgraced themselves since, with a lot of retractions. I saw an article not so long ago in The Atlantic saying, let's have an amnesty because we didn't really know what was going on, which, if you've ever seen an admission of guilt in your life, it's that we should all have an amnesty because we're terribly worried that once the Republicans win these elections, they'll come after all the people who made these terrible decisions, many of whom are on the left.
Don't you think there's some truth in the notion that we didn't know what was going on? I mean, scientists had to approach this with some humility, didn't they? It was
they didn't.
Wasn't a century virus. It was,
but they didn't. There was exactly the opposite attitude. In fact, it was, no, we know what's going on. In fact, we were told these vaccines were 95% effective. Pfizer's had to retract that thanks to an EU commission. I mean, we're finding out more and more that a lot of these people are pretty moronic. They're a lot like average citizens, and they had no claim to expert knowledge in any way, shape, or form, most especially the politicians, who obviously are only there by popularity contest. I mean, if anything, this whole episode has probably taught all of us to be more suspicious of government and less trusting of these politicians. Perhaps that's the rule. I don't know. We'll have to see when the election results this time roll through. A thing that I found interesting too, there are two other issues which the Republicans are making a big noise about, and you could tell me if they're actually the kinds of issues that most voters will go to the polls for this time around. The one being immigration. We've seen an unprecedented level of illegal immigration under Joe Biden. The odd number that they throw out that I saw just this week was between 5,000 and 6,000 people a day crossing the southern border. Whether or not that's exactly right is not the point. I think everyone who lives in Texas, New Mexico, California, and other parts further, more close to the Mexican border than others, these people are entering America. They're desperate. A lot of them are just walking straight across. There are no places to house these people. You mentioned Ron DeSantis earlier. He pulled a bit of a stunt earlier this year when he sent some of these immigrants to the neighborhood that Barack Obama lives in, Martha's Vineyard, where you have these extremely wealthy people, a lot of them very politically connected, a lot of them extremely well-known, and some of them with very reputable businesses. They certainly regard themselves as being quite blue. Couldn't wait to get these people out of Martha's Vineyard to wherever, as long as it wasn't in my backyard, the NIMBY thing. So illegal immigration, is that a big deal to most Americans or only to Texans?
Well, no, I think it's a big deal. It's definitely up there as an issue with the economy and crime certainly for Republican voters. And I know that when I'm in my office and I'm looking at different TVs, the liberal-leaning MSNBC network will be talking about January the 6th and the future of democracy and abortion rights. But Fox News, owned by Rupert Murdoch, conservative network, they spend a lot of time and resources talking about the US-Mexico border, and they'll fly drones over the border to show you people crossing, and they'll have all sorts of footage, and they'll have reporters on the ground and interview people. And I think that tells us that for one thing, it makes sort of dramatic, visceral TV for people with impact, and secondly, it's just really a talking point in the conservative world and in that ecosystem. Now, Joe Biden, the Democrats, would say that on his very first day in office, he put forward a plan for immigration reform, and they would say, yes, the immigration system in the US is broken and has been for some time due to congressional deadlock and politicians wrangling and so on. Biden has actually kept in place some of the border restrictions that Trump imposed, particularly during the pandemic.
And the children in cages. I mean, I'm laughing not because I think it's funny that there are children in cages, but because this was already something that was happening under the Obama administration many years before Trump, but it became a Democrat talking point under Trump.
Well, again, I think there were different circumstances there, but obviously Trump favored building a wall, and Biden's not a big fan of that, but that becomes a useful talking point for Republicans. And you know, one interesting spin-off from all this is we're going to be watching closely Latino voters in this election, including in Texas and other border states. The historic assumption has always been that they vote Democratic and that they would dislike Donald Trump's xenophobia and nativism. But opinion polls suggest, and recent elections suggest, Republicans are making inroads in that demographic. And in places like Texas, you are seeing some Latino candidates run as Republicans. And I think, you know, some of the argument, some of the logic there is that they say, you know, we came to this country, we came legally, therefore we don't appreciate people coming illegally. Some of them are second, third generation. They're buying into the American dream, the idea of working hard, rugged individualism. We're, you know, appreciating Republican low taxes, that they don't like some of the perceived democratic wokeness, so to speak, so on and so on. Very complex. Latinos are not a monolith. It's a very diverse group, but that's one to watch, I think, vis-a-vis the border security issue.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting observation that there may be a shift in patterns there, because, I mean, it has been the case that people have been looking at demographic blocks of voters for years and thought, well, these people are safe. They're on our side. I mean, in the last election, because Trump was so odious to white women in suburban America, it was fairly clear that Joe Biden could rely on their vote. But they're probably a little put off by some of the things they've seen Democrats doing in the last 2 years, and may this time be voting Republican again. Similarly, with the Hispanic vote, there's obviously quite a lot that's changed there, and probably people are talking also about the black vote, even though that's not monolithic, is it?
No, that's right. And I mean, and by the way, on white women in the suburbs, one trend we've seen is that the Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court seemed to boost Democrats among that group. But more recent weeks, it looks like many white women are now perhaps leaning back to Republicans because of the crime issue, which is always a fear in the suburbs. African-American voters, I mean, still overwhelmingly Democratic, but Donald Trump did actually make some gains there in 2020 compared to 2016. And of course, you know, all these elections are so close that you only need to pick off a few percentage points to make the difference, or you only need black voters to stay home and not vote at all, perhaps. And
well, I mean, you could say that if it wasn't for the black vote during the primaries in the Democratic primaries of 2020, we wouldn't have had Joe Biden, right?
That's right. Yes, it all turned when James Clyburn, a black congressman from South Carolina, threw his weight behind Biden, and South Carolina, a big high number of black voters there. They supported Biden, and that changed things around. But you know what's interesting is when he won the election, Joe Biden said, "You know, you had my back, I will have your back," to black voters. And but more recently, Al Sharpton, a longtime civil rights activist, said, "You know, Mr. President, you promised to have our back. Well, we're actually being stabbed in the back." And there's some disaffection among black voters that Biden and the Democratic Congress failed to pass legislation on police reform after the murder of George Floyd. And
well, that's an interesting one. I mean, what happened to the defund the police crowd, by the way, while we're on this? Because everyone's changed their tune on that too. It was also a bit of a misstep, wasn't it?
Again, complicated. I mean, someone like Joe Biden and the center of the party never used the phrase defund the police and wouldn't favor that. Some on the left did, and to this day, some still believe, look, you know, defund the police means moving resources to social programs, to education, to infrastructure that will actually reduce crime in other ways. But I think significantly in terms of how this election is going to go, that phrase has certainly been seized on by Republicans. And even at Saturday's rally, Donald Trump just sort of said in a nutshell, Democrats want to defund the police, Republicans want to defund the cartels, referring to drugs cartels at the US-Mexico border and so on. So it certainly has fed into a narrative that Democrats are soft on crime, that they're out of touch with people's everyday concerns, that they're too much part of the liberal elite and debating policies in universities and speaking to people with PowerPoint presentations rather than what you could put on a bumper sticker.
So on that note, do you think that the media have played any role in you mentioned that the two polar opposites of MSNBC and Fox, who are clearly on both sides very partisan, and have their narratives and almost have an agenda with talking points and follow that day in, day out, and cater to an audience that wants to hear that stuff, whether they're on the left with MSNBC or on the right with Fox. But in general, the mainstream media, how have they been? Warm, cold, better with one party than the other? Because often we hear that there's a cozy relationship between some people in the Democratic establishment and so many people in mainstream media. We saw former White House spokesperson going to work for MSNBC. Many other members of the the Biden administration have come out of the media, and it seems to be a bit of a revolving door. Or do you think that that's just a story that the Republicans like trotting out to show that the media are also your enemies?
I'm always hesitant to generalize about the media, and one time in South Africa before the 2010 World Cup, the head of FIFA hauled me out onto a football pitch to explain to South Africans why the media are so biased against South Africa. And in this instance, I would challenge one premise of your question in that I don't think MSNBC and Fox News are two sides of the same coin. They're certainly both partisan, but I would argue Fox News is really trading in disinformation and is very extreme and is legitimizing some pretty crazy people and election deniers. MSNBC, I think, is a bit more sort of reasonable. But having said that, just to argue slightly against myself, I will acknowledge that you're going to have an interesting counterpoint where Jen Psaki, as you say, the White House press secretary, formerly is about to join MSNBC, whereas Fox News currently has Kayleigh McEnany, who was a Trump.
Sure. So no, absolutely.
There are some mirror images there, but I would argue it's still not.
The only reason I'm not asking because I'm trying to stab the media here. The reason I think this is relevant is because so many people in the US despise the media. They feel that the media has been peopled with people of a specific ideological bent. They also think that those people have it in for them, that they're a bunch of elites who look down at them. The famous Hillary Clinton deplorables line comes to play here. Perhaps some people would be motivated to vote Republican just because they hate the media. I mean, that's entirely possible. Donald Trump made no bones about the fact that he was positioning himself against the mainstream media. That's obviously got some hangover potential.
Yet again, at the Trump rally I went to on Saturday, he used his line about the media being the enemy of the people, and the crowd all turned on us and booed and jeered and so on. A pantomime. Yes, I mean, I think the media is very complex and varied here. There's a growing right-wing media sector, but New York Times, Washington Post are certainly probably more on the liberal side and get criticized for it. Although when those outlets do a story that's critical of Joe Biden, you see lots of left-wingers on Twitter sort of denouncing it, saying, how dare you criticize him, concentrate on Republicans and so on. It's a very vibrant, complicated space. But I mean, your central point, I think, is right, that there is a perception, at least among conservatives, Republicans, that left-wing liberals now control everything, the universities, the political parties, NGOs, and certainly the media. and that Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and so on have friends in the liberal media, and that does generate resentment and backlash. And one of the consequences we've seen of that in this midterm election is that quite a few Republican candidates are really refusing to talk to the mainstream media. They're not giving interviews to the New York Times or Washington Post. They're laser focused on their own right-wing channels, which are cable news or online or whatever. But it's all about mobilizing the base. It's about sort of connecting with your own supporters and just screening out the noise of other people. And I think that yet again contributes to polarization, fragmentation. There's not a national conversation anymore, and therefore we've seen fewer debates as well.
So what does this mean for Joe Biden? Because if the Dems have a really poor showing in this election, whether it's just in the House, where they could lose somewhere north of 30 seats if things go really poorly, they could even lose the Senate, because that really tends to be a bit of a what would you call it? Almost a referendum on the incumbent. Would this mean that Joe Biden is looking very precarious? People are already saying he's very old and doddery. He has to be kind of guided around either by Jill or by an aide. And a lot is made of this, especially in the right-wing press. But he hasn't been at his best. And there are, even in those speeches where he's tried really to electrify the supporters, the people in his core audience, the people he usually could rely on, it hasn't gone terribly well. So people are waiting in the wings to get rid of him. If you think that is the case, that perhaps post the midterms, they'll say, oh, shame, poor old Joe, we'll retire him and put him in a home. Who comes in then after that, if that's going to happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think elections are all about expectations, and there's been so much pessimism about how Democrats are going to perform now, but actually, if they only lose 10 seats in the House, and if they hold on to the Senate, that would actually be regarded as a victory.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see the way the narrative plays out for Biden. But let's just suppose Democrats have a terrible night. I think, yes, you will see people say Joe Biden's about to turn 80. He's guided us to defeat here. We really need new blood. And you may particularly hear that from the left of the party. However, I think Joe Biden has two secret weapons. One is the lack of an obvious heir apparent. Normally, you would expect that to be the vice president, but there is just not a clamor for Kamala Harris to run in Biden's place. She hasn't dazzled. She hasn't impressed. You could debate endlessly whether sexism and racism are in play there, or is it her own performance, or a bit of both. But there is no sort of big Harris movement. And then if you look at the other candidates, again, there is no clear front runner there. It could be Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. It could be Pete Buttigieg, the transport secretary. There are a few other names in the mix, but Bernie Sanders, senator, is now in his 80s, probably too old. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in her 30s, probably too young. But I think the other secret weapon for Joe Biden is who is he going to be up against? I think if it was it's Ron DeSantis or someone younger and dynamic, then Biden's in trouble. But the most likely scenario is that it will be Donald Trump again, who's, as you noted, also in his 70s, currently 76. And the argument from Biden will be quite simple. I beat him once, I can beat him again. Biden won the 2020 election. And
to be fair too, the argument against Trump would be, well, the people who hated him before are not going to change their mind if he gives one really great speech. So they're already on the negative, and it would be very hard to convince the people who feel that he's disappointed them that he will do a better job this time round. That's on his own team, let alone on the other side.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're the Democratic Party, much as you would love to make history, perhaps with the first female president, or in Pete Buttigieg's case, the first openly gay president, I think pragmatism will kick in, and they'll say it's just too much of a gamble with the American electorate to do that when Trump is the nominee, and to go back by saying that is Armageddon for us.
Let's just talk about some specific races here, because I know we're almost out of time, and I don't want to take up more of your time on this very busy day. I appreciate you putting some aside for us. So let's look at a few of these people. You talk about the first female or first openly gay president, if that does materialize, but we may have the first brain damaged stroke victim as a senator. And this seems to be something which has polarized people, not only in Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman is running, against Dr. Oz, the TV physician. I mean, it's crazy. This is Idiocracy, the movie, playing out. But this guy clearly is suffering from some cognitive impairments. He may be on the road to recovery, who knows, but he needs a big screen with the written words on it in order to interpret in real time what's being asked of him. He had a horrendous debate the other night. People on the left are obviously saying it's a heroic story of someone who's on the road to recovery while they're doing this brave thing of running for Senate, and he's a hero and we should all stand by him. And on the other side, we've got people who are saying this guy's got serious problems, and do we have such low standards for politicians that we're prepared to take someone who's got acknowledged, brain injury?
Well, I think another way to look at it is, do we really want to discriminate against people who have strokes or have...
Well, speaking and reading is fairly important for a senator, you'd think.
The doctors, the medical experts have said he's still perfectly capable of doing this job of being a senator. And, there are already some senators.
These are the same doctors and the medical experts who told us that wearing masks would make a difference. See what I mean?
I would argue it did make a difference, and I still wear masks sometimes. But
good luck.
I certainly think tactically it's obviously been a huge blow to Democrats in terms of John Fetterman doesn't come over sparklingly in debates and is the first to acknowledge that. It's been seized on by Republicans in the usual somewhat exploitative way. I mean, the Senate is so finely poised we may look back historically and say control of the entire Senate hinged on that one moment that one candidate had a stroke. Maybe the stroke that changed the course of history, that changed the world. But overall, I would say Fetterman as lieutenant governor with his record has much better qualifications than a TV doctor who...
Yes, except that just this week he said, I've campaigned against Roe v. Wade. I celebrate the demise of Roe v. Wade in one sentence, which means exactly the opposite. It's an oxymoron as per textbook. So what do we believe?
Sorry, sorry?
That was Fetterman. He made that statement just this week. It's complete nonsense.
He's also been criticised for a remark in the debate about his views on fracking, which was somewhat incoherent. But what I would also say about that is look at Joe Biden's word salads, and most importantly, look at Donald Trump's word salads. I mean, this guy is just a stream of consciousness, sometimes total nonsense, some of it malicious lying, and sometimes just words flowing in random orders. So if we're going to hold politicians to that standard, they have to speak clearly and coherently the whole time and make sense. Then I think
all right. Well, let's look at some of the more competitive areas at the moment. The states that you're most interested in watching results from tonight, the places that you think will be an indication of how the rest will go. Can you give us some idea of that, of what you'll be paying attention to?
Sure. Well, you just mentioned Pennsylvania, and I think which is Joe Biden's birthplace, and it's no coincidence that over the weekend we had Donald Trump, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden all campaigning there. It could be absolutely pivotal. The race for the Senate between Fetterman and Oz. Another one that's emerged as vital is Georgia. Remember, we used to talk about Florida a lot as the ultimate battleground. Probably Georgia has replaced Florida as Florida turns more and more Republican. And in Georgia, we have a Senate race between two African-American men, Raphael Warnock, a Democrat who's a pastor at Martin Luther King's old church in Atlanta. He's the incumbent senator, and he's up against Herschel Walker, who, like Dr. Oz, is a Trump pick with no discernible political experience. He's just there as a celebrity because he was great at playing American football, and Obama had some great fun mocking that reality. Walker's also faced scandals because he opposed abortion rights, but it turns out he's allegedly paid for 2 women to have abortions. And just as we saw in January last year, Georgia may be absolutely fundamental in determining control of the Senate, and that race may well go to a runoff in December. So this drags on and on. In the Georgia governor's race, Stacey Abrams, who we talked about before, she's bidding to become the first Black woman ever to be a governor of any American state, and that would be remarkable in the Deep South as its history of slavery and segregation and lynchings. But some polls suggest you will probably lose to the incumbent Brian Kemp, who interestingly opposed Donald Trump and beat the Trump candidates. And he's currently the governor, will probably remain so. I'd also be looking to Ohio, which has historically always been a swing state. It's trended more Republican these days. And we have a Trump candidate, J.D. Vance, up against a Democrat, Tim Ryan, who Ryan has really almost run against his own party. He did not want Biden campaigning for him. He said he's agreed with Trump on issues such as China. He's playing that card of the blue collar working class Democrat in a state which is leaning in that direction. But polls suggest, despite Tim Ryan's energy and efforts and enthusiasm, it's probably not going to work for him. And then finally, and perhaps most intriguingly of all, the one I really want to watch is Arizona, further to the west, because that could be ground zero for election deniers for the attack on American democracy. In the governor's race, the Senate races are close, but in the governor's race, we have Carrie Lake, a former TV anchor who is running as a Republican. She's like a new strain of Trumpism. She's a new variant, very telegenic, charismatic, very, very smooth in interviews. So smooth that she can say, utterly insane things that are just untrue, but a lot of people believe it. Like Trump, she's learned the grammar, the mechanics of television, and it just so happens that she's up against a Democrat, Katie Hobbs, who is not especially charismatic and has not run a particularly energized campaign, and she's been criticized for that. And Carrie Lake is a brazen election denier. Some people are even predicting she could be Donald Trump's running mate in 2024. If she wins the governor's race, and if a guy called Mark Fincham is elected Secretary of State, he's also a radical election denier, then where does Arizona go from there? And, in 2024, if it's a close election in Arizona, can those people be trusted to do it freely and fairly, or will they just throw it in Donald Trump's favor?
One of my favorite things is to listen to Bill Maher, who you couldn't really say is on the right. And he's had a couple of interesting things to say these days that gets him into trouble with the left. And he said, you can hate these candidates, but you can't hate the people who voted for them because they're your next door neighbors. They're your fellow Americans. And you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview that, every election they say is the one that defines America, and this is the one which will either save or destroy democracy. And that's obviously because politicians want people to go out and vote for them, obviously. But there has to be some part of America that turns away from this extreme polarity. Are there any people on the campaign trail at the moment talking about that? Or is it becoming so much more fractious that you could foresee America splitting into two different kinds of country, if not two different actual countries? Because some historians are already starting to presage all of this with their predictions that this is on the way and it's inevitable. Do you think that's the truth?
Well, Tim Ryan, who I just mentioned, has certainly been trying to bridge some of those gaps and criticize his own party as sometimes too elite or too woke, if you want to use those terms, and trying to connect. But one thing that sticks in my mind was going to Georgia, to the home district of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's one of the most extreme Republicans. And I spent some time on the campaign trail with her Democratic opponent, Marcus Flowers, who's African-American. He's a military veteran. And I just went with him door to door, just walking up garden paths, knocking on front doors, watching him talk to voters who were there. One guy opened the door and said, "You're a Democrat, so are you in favor of killing unborn babies?" But then I watched Marcus Flowers engage with him, talk about his record of service, talk about his commitment to military veterans, and actually win this guy round. And by the end, the guy said, "I'm going to vote for you. If you're for military veterans, that's good for me, and I'm going to tell my friends." And so, there, one by one, I saw this Democrat trying to change hearts and minds, trying to have that personal connection. And it's a lot harder to dismiss and demonize someone when they're literally standing on your doorstep and you're seeing them there in person. And I think there are thousands of Marcus Flowers around the country trying to do similar things, but for all the reasons we know, they certainly get less attention in the media than the radical extremists and the loudest voices, and same on social media as well. So I really don't know where this is heading. There are moments like that that give you optimism, but then go to a Donald Trump rally where every single person is convinced that the election was stolen. Every single person is just deeply rooted in this warped belief system that doesn't bear much relation to reality. And you think, how can this big chunk of the population ever be won back? And where is America headed on this? And I really daren't imagine.
Well, I suppose we'll find out. We'll find out in a few hours' time. We'll figure out who's right and who's wrong, and what the American public want in their new crop of governors, senators, and representatives. So all of that's in the balance. But David, it's always good to have your take on these things, and thank you very much for taking the time and for sharing with us your insights. I hope we'll see you again soon. Good luck for today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.